Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to paint these 3 beginner-friendly watercolor Valentine's designs. You can use them for cards or just for gifts or anything you'd like really. They're pretty easy and have minimal supplies, so let's get started. So I've linked my supplies down in the description box below, including the watercolor, paper, and brush that I'm using, and I will just be doing this with a size 3 round brush today, so keeping the supplies pretty simple here. And I've also traced my design really lightly onto my paper. You can feel free to do this or just follow along. Either way is going to work fine. I'll leave that up to you. Now let's get started painting. So for the beginning here, I'm going to start by mixing 3 different types of green. So I'm going to do one green as the foundation for all of these. And one of the greens will have some more blue tones added in. So, kind of making a teal bluish green, and another one is going to have more yellowish brown tones added in to make it a bit brighter and more earthy. And we're going to use those 3 with all of our leaves just to give them all some dimension and variation in color, which I think really adds a nice touch. So yeah, just mix up those 3 greens here until you have what you like. And just make sure you're using a good amount of water when mixing all of these. And we can always grab more water as we're painting as well, so I think that looks good for now, and we can get started putting some paint down. I'm going to start out with my main green color and just begin with this stem on the left here, right at the bottom, making a very thin line with the tip of my brush. And once I've made that line, I'm going to start adding a leaf on the side of it here. So to make the leaf, just start with the tip of the brush where you're leaving the stem. Press harder as you get to the center of the leaf, and then bring it up to a fine point again at the end, and then do the same thing back in the other direction, bringing it back to the stem. I also like to grab a little bit of that teal color and drop that where it's connecting to the stem to add some dimension, maybe grabbing some of the yellow and dropping that at the tip of the leaf, just adding some variation in color there. And we'll do the same thing for our other leaves. And I'm also just dipping into my water jar once in a while here when I feel like it needs more water to help keep the paint moving. You don't want to make it too watered down or too thin at this point, just enough that the different colors blend together so they're not too dry when we're dropping them into the leaf. So we'll do 3 leaves over here. And just keep putting those touches of color at the stem and at the tip of the leaf. And now I'll make a thin stem going up, not really in the center, but a little bit off to the side here. We'll do a leaf on the side of that one using the same technique. And then we'll just start painting in some of these stems off to the right. I won't bring them all the way up because the stems that'll connect to a heart will have a bit of red where they're getting closer to the heart. So I'm only going to bring the green a little bit up for now. And then we'll move over to the right-hand side here where this one will have 3 leaves growing off of it. So we can just use green here. And just keep grabbing some water from your jar to keep the color flowing nicely as we paint these leaves. As we mentioned, we want to keep everything mixing together and you don't want it to be too dry yet. So there's 1 leaf. Maybe it'll help if I have my jar in view here. And 1 leaf down here. And 1 more coming up out of the center. And once we're done that leaf, I'm gonna wash off my brush and start making some reds for the hearts that we're gonna add in. So I'll just flip my palette over here and I'm going to mix up 3 different kinds of red. So we'll have kind of a bright, normal looking red, and then one that is a bit darker, richer with a little bit of brown and black added, and one that is more of a pink. So we'll mix these up to your liking. And I think that looks pretty good. Just going for some nice distinction between these, but we'll end up mixing some of them together anyhow. So yeah, let's get started with these hearts. So the first one I'm going to make is off to the side here, and I'm just going to put some water down and do a bit of a wet on wet technique. So just paint out the general shape first, and then I'll grab my darker red and start dropping that into the water and letting it all blend together. And then just pull down the bottom of the heart to meet the stem. And I'll grab a little bit of green to blend those together, just a tiny bit to kind of amalgamate the colors. And then we'll grab some red to bring it up to this next heart over here so they can blend together before the green dries. Now I'm going to grab some of the kind of regular red color, this nice bright red, and paint in this bigger heart over here. And drop in a little more concentrated color at the base of the heart and at the very edges to create a bit of depth. Now I'll grab the dark red and make a little heart above this one. I'm just going straight onto the paper with it because my paint is kind of plenty wet. So you can do some of the wet on wet if you'd like, though. As you can see, they have a kind of similar outcome, some slight variations. And just keep dropping some dark, more concentrated colors to the part where the heart connects with the stem, and then bring this little stem down. And we'll grab that main red color again and start painting in this big heart over here. I'm going to use a bit more water for this one because it's such a large shape. I don't want to run out of paint or have it get too dry. We're just going to fill it all in. And just keep adding water as you go when you feel that it's needed. Just making sure that's nice and blended out and that you have the outline the way that you want it. And while it's wet, just drop a bit more of that color at the base of the heart and again around the edges to add some depth to it. I'm also going to mix up a tiny bit of orange, just to add a bit of variation in the colors here. We have a lot of reds. I think this could use a little pop of orange on the edges. And while that blends together, we'll just bring this stem down towards the green, grabbing a tiny bit of green to help blend those two together. And I'm going to grab some green and start painting in these stems over here, being careful not to bring it right up to the edge of the heart because it's still a little bit wet. You don't want them to run together too much. And again, I'm just mixing a little bit of red in right at the edge where the stem meets the heart, and then we'll start painting in the shape of the heart. So I'm going to use my red again here. And add a bit of pink to this one. And a bit more red at the bottom here. You can just drop the colors in wherever it feels right to you. There's really no rules here, just whatever looks nice and speaks to you. For this heart at the top, I'm going to go with a bit more pink on mine. And a bit of red at the bottom there. Now I'm going to grab some of this dark red and make a thin stem going up to this pink heart. And I'm going to add some little darker red hearts off of this stem and in a few other parts of the arrangement. So we'll do one on the left here. It's going to be just a very small little heart, kind of a little longer than the other ones and a little bit darker. But same general idea. And another one over on the right here, just a very thin stem and two little heart petals. And then we'll get a little bit of green to add a stem to the right here above that. And there's going to be a little pink flower on the right hand side off of this stem. So clean off my brush when I'm done that and grab some pink. And we'll just be making two pink petals here, kind of looking off to the side, and one of them curving down below. So it's like a little open flower that's looking sideways. And after that's done, we're going to go back to the green side of our paint palette and just finish off the remainder of our leaves. They're just kind of all around the top here, so just follow along and add them in using the same technique as we did with the first leaves. So creating that bigger shape in the middle, leaving that point at the end, and dropping in color at the tip and base of every leaf. And we're just about done. Just a couple more leaves on the right hand side here. And then we finished our first design. And one more up at the right here. There we are. So our little heart bouquet is finished now. Sometimes I like to take a little bit of green and add some details over the leaves, but overall that's the main painting finished here. So when you're all wrapped up, you can get ready to start the next one. It's going to be some more greenery and hearts. So all the techniques you've been practicing are really going to pay off for the next design as well. So for this next design, we're going to start pretty similar to the last one, mixing up 3 main shades of green. So you have your regular green and a more earthy green, yellowish kind of tone, and then one that's more bluish teal. And then we'll start using that to paint out our stems and leaves, just really using the same leaf technique that we did in the last one. So let's get started and you can follow along with me. So we'll start with the first stem on the left-hand side here. And we'll just be leaving some gaps where there will be other leaves or hearts in the way. So we'll leave those empty for now and we'll be painting them in later as we move along from left to right with our stems. Okay, and once we're done that last leaf on the right, we'll flip that palette over and go back to our reds and pinks. Again, going with the same kind of tones as last time. So mixing up a pink, a darker red, and a brighter red. And then we'll just start painting the hearts in, kind of spreading out those different shades, but also mixing them in with each other while the heart is wet, allowing some of the colors to blend together. I'm going to start with the pink on this bottom one here, and just make sure you don't get super close to those leaves, because if the leaves are still wet, the colors might run together a little bit. So making sure to leave a gap between the heart and the leaves. I'm going to drop in some red at the bottom of this one. I'm going to use some red for this heart up here. And just keep mixing in some more of those colors at the base and edges. And then just make your way across, painting in those other 3 hearts, using kind of a mix of all these different reds and pinks. I'm going to drop just a tiny bit of orange into this one here. Really water that down and add it while it's still wet so that it blends together. And then we'll finish that last heart over on the right. And once this last heart is done, we'll just let it dry completely before adding the last leaf up to the top right. I just don't want to paint the leaf in while this heart is still too wet, because then the green and the red will run together and might get a bit muddy. So just finish this up and then make sure it's dry before going in to add that leaf. I'm going to skip ahead here and paint mine in now that it's dry. So just a little stem underneath there and finish off with the leaf coming out of the top here. And once that's done, we're all finished and ready to move on to the next design. So for this last one, we're going to be painting a really easy Valentine's heart balloon. We're going to use a wet on wet technique. So we're going to start by painting the shape of the balloon with just plain water, just leaving a gap for where the light would be shining on the top right hand side. And once we have the water all over the main shape, we're going to drop in that main red color that we've been using all along. So we'll start by painting that in with water. So again, filling in the whole shape, but leaving kind of a little sliver on the top right hand side where the light would be shining on the balloon. And once you're done filling that in, we'll grab that red color and just start dropping it all over the balloon. So trying to follow the main outline of the heart and getting those edges really as neat and tidy as you want them, but it's really going to start bleeding together for the first while. So we'll let the color kind of play and spread out, and then we can finesse those edges and do touch-ups once we have all of the color mixed into the water. And as it dries, it's really going to blend so nicely together, and you'll get a very interesting interaction with the water and the paint. This is what I really love about watercolor. The pigments turn to magic once they're floating around in water. It's just such a cool effect. It's really one of my favorite parts. Now that we have all the shape filled in with color, I'm going to just grab a bit of water over this white spot because I don't want it to be such a stark white. Just put some water over there and then dry the brush and lift some of that pigment back up from that shape. I just want it to have a nicer blend with the color instead of being such a harsh line. And then I'll start dropping some of the more concentrated red in the parts where the balloon would have more shadow. So that's like at the bottom base of the balloon and the curve at the top where the two halves of the heart meet, and around the outer edges. By adding the darker color while it's still wet so that everything can blend together, you're going to get a lot more dimension, and it will give it kind of that 3D shape that the balloon has. And while that finishes drying, I'm going to mix up some concentrated black so we can add the thin string at the bottom of the balloon. And also when the balloon's completely dry, we'll add the little strings at the base of the balloon, like the part where you blow it up and tie the balloon. So we can start doing the line now. Just going straight down in a very thin line using just the tip of the brush. And to do the part where the balloon is tied up, I'm just going to pause my recording here to make sure it's totally dry, so the black doesn't run into the red. And when yours is entirely dry, we can take a very thin line of black straight across the base of the balloon, and then just do a little kind of X to show the strings where the balloon is tied. And there's our balloon all finished. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all your support. If you have any ideas for tutorials you'd like to see, please leave them in the comment box below, and be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of new tutorials in future. I really hope we can paint together again soon. Thanks for joining me and have a great day. Bye.